Good evening, friends. This is Shubha Lakshmi from I Nature Watch Foundation. Today we are going to talk about agrobiodiversity or agriculture biodiversity. This is this is rather very unusual topic. One, at least I have not come across anybody speaking about it, and uh, my interest with this subject basically lies with the biodiversity aspect of it. That there is so much of biodiversity involved in agriculture, and that we really miss out uh, when we talk about biodiversity. We really miss out on talking about agricultural biodiversity. It is more of wildlife biodiversity that we actually talk about. And so, therefore, I thought of taking on this topic. I must put, you know, um, I must say this that this is first of all I'm not an expert on this topic. This is a completely new topic to me also, as much it will be probably for you. But this is just I'm sharing because of my fascination with the subject, and I wanted to uh, I wanted to really highlight that there is this biodiversity that we really look into while growing our vegetables, our crops, our wherever agriculture is happening, biodiversity should be part of it. So that from that angle, I'm actually going to present this presentation. So if you ask me something, and if I'm unable to answer, please bear with me, because I'll try to find answers for you and get back to you. But as of now, I'm also learning, but I'm sharing my my curiosity with you, and I'm sure that you also be very curious, and you yourself will go up and read up something more. Okay, so whoever is joining for today's webinar, please let me know from which location you're joining, and it will be nice to know. So you can write about your location in the comment box, and as I go by the presentation, you can keep writing your questions in the comment box. I will respond to it. If I see it, if we have time, I'll respond to it while going through it, or I'll surely respond to it in the comment box later on. So you can always see it. And since this is a Facebook live session, which also means that you will get the recording to see even if you get to miss out. Okay. And also please excuse me in case there is a network connection for any reason, my video gets stopped. I'll come back again. Actually, in my previous webinar it happened, so I'm just warning you. Please don't go, and you can log in again. Okay, so let's get started, friends. Please let me know from where you are joining. I can see people joining in, so please mention. Please write your location. It will be good to know. It's a good. Okay, so this is also we are we are doing this online course called kitchen gardening for beginners. So our course participants have also joined. I can see Linakshi joining here, and some more of our course participants will also join. This is like an add-on session which we are doing with our course participants, and we thought that we can open it up for the public also. So let us know how you actually find this topic. This is actually, let me tell you, it is by name of it, it is actually appears to be a very boring topic, because it's all about crops. But I will try to make it as interesting possible within my capacity. Yeah. So here we go. So let's get these definitions right. So thank you for writing, Geeta, Abhishek, Jignesh, Parul. Thank you for Parul. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining the uh, session. So let's get the definitions first of what is agriculture. So agriculture is nothing but the science or practice of growing food, which will be growing food for like the vegetables, fruits, crops, or even raising animals for milk, meat, wool, all that material. So it's plant, it's agriculture where what is the animal husbandry, where the animal component also comes in. So the growing, this is science behind of growing all this is called is agriculture. Then what is biodiversity? Sorry, it got overlapping. So biodiversity is variety of life, as simple as that. The more variations, more variety of different life forms existing in it. So that is a variety of it. So I gave you the definition of what agriculture is and what biodiversity is, and then what is agrobiodiversity. So agrobiodiversity refers to agriculture plus biodiversity. So it includes all different kinds of plants and animals that people raise for food. It also includes living things in the soil that break down and recycle soil nutrients, as well as bees, that the pollinators, insects, and the pest also. So this is an entire combination of what kind of life forms are actually on the plants, growing on the plants, under the soil, even the environment, which environment it is interacting. So all that put together is what agrobiodiversity could be, defined. And just one trivia over here, you can see that in Andes Mountains, that is in South America, the farmers grow over 3,000 different types of potato varieties. Now that is a diversity. That is a diversity of potato species. So this is the kind of diversity we are actually talking about. Friends who are joining later on, please let me know from which location you are joining. Thank you, Abhijit. And so agriculture biodiversity includes all species that are closely interwoven in our agriculture ecosystem. Now what are these? So it is first we got food, then the fiber, the fuel, and this is everything that comes from. So all our actually roti kapda or makan, if you say, is all dependent on agriculture, and this entire thing is coming from the farms to us in different forms to us. Yeah, and this is a result of, from like the way farmers or the way people have been managing the crops, and how the species have been changing under different circumstances. Yeah, so even like I gave the example of the potato, there are 3,000. How the farmers came up with 3,000 varieties? It's just that they have been tweaking certain conditions, tweaking soil condition, tweaking climatic condition, tweaking nutrient condition. So all those tweaking actually generates the varieties. So that is how this this entire diversity has come up. So agriculture biodiversity is not only related with only food, but it is also related with social cultural aspect, as well as economic aspect, as well as environmental aspect. So all these components are actually connected to agriculture. So agriculture by itself is actually having so much of repercussion on so many other things around it, that usually we don't don't really look into that aspect, and that's what I'm going to highlight a bit of it. So agriculture biodiversity exists because of the interaction between people and environment, and because people have been doing the small tweaking exercises in their farming processes, and that's the reason the variety has given. And I'll just read out some examples over here, that the diversity in the seeds, that in like almost 120 varieties of quinoa seeds were actually the local farmers were able to generate just by tweaking by doing the small experiments. Even in Africa, the honey collectors were actually they found ways of not really disturbing the bee population, and yet collecting the honey. So they knew that as long as the bees are there in the forest, so the honey production would be, so that is a sustainable way of actually utilizing the resources. So these are the farmers who actually have been tweaking their own practices to come up with the new practices as well as the new varieties. And in India alone, like they say that we have over 100 varieties of mango itself. Now these varieties, how they have come up, we'll actually talk about it, that what is actually, how this variation, what really makes this variations to come up. But if you look at the importance of agrobiodiversity, so one is that it increases the productivity. Because of the sheer diversity, it increases the productivity, which means that there is more food available for longer time, for future generation. So it also takes care of the food security. And also there is an economic gain. So the farmers who are involved in the doing more diversified farming, so there is like economic gain throughout the year. It is not a seasonal. They are not making money only as per the season, but they are actually making money for running growing different crops in different seasons. Yeah, and it reduces the pressure of agriculture in fragile areas and endangered species. So that like for example, rice as a cultivation practice, if you look at it, it just needs more and more open land and more open forested areas has been taken to it. But if not for rice, if you want to grow some other plants, so you probably will not need that kind of land again. So like changing the patterns of what you're growing, and the land requirements also changes. So it reduces the pressure on fragile areas, and then fragile areas, I mean to say the forested forested areas, and forested areas, if they are actually having endangered species, so you are protecting the endangered species also through this, and making farming ecosystem more sustainable and more robust. It's not like, it is not like, oh, it is driven, like it is just, if the rain is not there, then the entire crop has failed and there is nothing to grow, and the farmers actually, go into losses or whatever. We all know of the farmers suicides that have happened. So it's just like, because the system is not sustainable, and that's the reason. And also to contribute a sound pest and disease management, because when sustainable agriculture practices are used, so you get into the biological control, you get into the species that are resistant to pests, you encourage more biodiversity in the farm, which will actually take care of the pests. So all these practices actually put together is actually part of agrobiodiversity. And I already mentioned the diversification in the crops, but also by retaining the soil quality, by having, you all may know that, by doing rotation, the soil quality is actually retained, so it is not been used by the same crop again and again. So there are various benefits of agrobiodiversity. In fact, agrobiodiversity by itself is such a vast topic. If you go and Google it, it is mind-boggling. You will be confused at what I should be reading and what I should be not reading. It is that vast topic, and it is completely injustice to the subject if I'm trying to cramp it up into a 1 hour presentation. But I'm just trying to give you an highlight about it. And if you're interested in having this presentation, you can write to us. We will actually share this presentation with you. So let's move further. So it is also okay, this example had already given that about the varieties. I'll just skip this slide. So there are three aspects into 3 dimensions of agrobiodiversity. One is the genetic resources, which is normally are the crops only. Then there is the biodiversity ecosystem services, the services that is needed for the crops to grow. So what does a crop takes from the environment? So that kind of support system. And then there is a socio-economic and cultural aspect of it. We'll try to go detail one by one. So in agriculture biodiversity, so if you look at the species level, the species level, if you see, the species means the variety of crops that has been grown. Yeah, so there are some 8 crops which have been grown over here. But the genetic level is what? The variation of a particular species. Like for example, how many variety of apples are there? How many varieties of bananas are there? How many varieties of, here the pine trees are there? So that variety comes to the genetic level. So there is a species level, then the genetic level. And what does the genetic level means? Like here is where farmers have been tweaking, for reason that these are all cash crops, of course. So the more variety, like in India, if there are more variety of mangoes, so the more, so there is a more sale of it, or more variety to relish also. So like here it mentions that there are more than 7,000 apple varieties that are grown around the world, and each has its own distinct flavor. That's so unique actually. And also the bananas. So bananas with yellow and orange flesh have more vitamin A than the cream fleshed bananas. So each aspect of the fruit, the engineers of this fruits, of course the scientists are there, but the ground level engineers are the farmers. Farmers are the one who have been doing this small indigenous experiments within their farms and tweaking it in such a way to get a better yield. So the traditional farming practices which were there, the farmers were saving the seeds, which has when Green Revolution had started, it had stopped that time, because it was all driven by companies, so buying seeds from the companies. But now I think the organic farming is taking lead, and now again the farmers are into the of conserving the seeds and growing them, tweaking them. So that constant experiment is happening. As I said, that I don't have an experience of an agricultural background or something, but this is what it might be happening, and people who might be having a background or who are into farming, they would probably give a better example of how this is done. But what is important of the agrobiodiversity part is that, like when so it is a gene, it is the DNA of future. So this gene pool is more important for us to retain our food security. So there are around 940 species of cultivated plants, which are as of now today is actually threatened. Why they are on verge that we are going to lose them. For reason that if a species has been not really grown again and again, and so the chances of forgetting it, and many of these experiments are still trapped in the traditional knowledge domain. It is passed on from the father to son or mother to daughter, and that's how it has been by word of mouth. It goes. So that is still trapped in over there, and if that has been not documented or that has been not used, so we might lose a species altogether. And when a species or the diversity within a species is lost, we also lose the genes that could be important for improving crops, promoting their resistance to the pest and diseases, and adapting them for climate change. So all this is small tweaking which the farmers do. They will not get the chance to tweak that particular species if we lose it. So that are the one of the dangers of what will happen if we lose our biodiversity in the agriculture sector. So what are the ecosystem services that help our crops to grow? So one is the nutrient cycling. So nutrient cycling could be done by the termites who are actually doing the cycling in the nutrient cycling in the soil, or also the a plant is like, for example, the biodiversity ecosystem which is existing among the farms, how they are the kind of food chains which are existing. So there's the food is getting transferred from one level to other level. So there is a nutrient cycle which is going on. If there are animals, the dung would be falling in the farm, the dung gets decomposed, that adds value. So that is cycling. So the agents of cycling who are there, so they are the one who play one important role. So there are two sections in this. One is a living forms and one is a non-living forms. Non-living forms, you have this agent of nutrient cycling, then you have the pest and disease controllers who could be biological controller. It could be a bird, it could be a reptile, it could be maybe an insect also, like a praying mantis or a ladybird beetle. Pollination, bees, flies, moths, butterflies. So they are the another agents who are doing the pollination. So the pollination is needed. Plus all that is happening above the ground. There has to be action happening below the ground also, because the soil needs to be really fertile, and that the one who ensures the microbes, the fungi, they are the one who do the decomposing job, and they ensure that the soil quality. So this entire cycle has to be in tandem for everything to operate and for having a good crop. And what are the abiotic factors or the non-living factors? Is that the pollution, the amount of pollution that is there in that area, that can affect the crop. Maintenance of water cycle, especially how much of water is getting used up, water supply system, rain situation, all that also matters the crop thing. And the erosion control, how much of soil is getting washed away, how much of sedimentation is happening in the water bodies. And then the way climate change, the impact, the weather conditions, extreme rain, extreme heat, dry weather, all these things also affect the systems. And if these are not in a favorable condition for the farm or for a particular crop, then obviously the crop will fail. So this is an ecosystem which is needed. So if the focus has been just given on plant and not really looking into the other aspect of it, then that is where the process of growing food is very shortened. Like you just pump chemicals, make the plant grow, get the yield, sell it off, and then something goes wrong, then this entire system just collapses. But if you have a complex system, then if one thing collapses, the other thing at least takes care of it. So that is what is the biodiversity role is there in agriculture. We'll talk about it more as we move further. More people are joining, so may I request from where you are joining, let me know. You can write the location in the comment box. Okay, so how people create? I've been telling you this, they have been tweaking. So here I'll just read out what is mentioned here. That's okay. Over past 10,000 years, people have been creating countless varieties of crops and livestock breeds. Not only of plants, even of the weeds. So here is that each growing season, a farmer saved seeds or took cuttings from plants that grew well in local soils and weather conditions, or that were best able to resist disease or insect pests. Over the time, they developed varieties that produce food under varying environmental conditions. Farmers also alter the soil and other parts of the landscape, and this in turn affects the biodiversity. So which means that the farmer is constantly working, not only actual working, but also observing that which plant is doing well and what. And that's how they collect the seeds, that's how they collect the gene pool. the root stock or the stem or the seeds. So they collect that so that they can actually grow it again next season to have a better yield. So this small kind of observations what they have been doing is like immense. I think that is a knowledge that is still remaining to be documented. It is still that it comes under the traditional knowledge, and that knowledge is still has not really come into mainstream. It has been not the information has not come through. So here is an example they have shown of a wild cabbage. So wild cabbage has been grown for nearly, you can see, seven seven types of vegetables are grown out of wild cabbage itself. So that cabbage was so they were tweaked for the leaves, they were tweaked for the buds, they were tweaked for the flowers. So based on the characters, which aspect they wanted the species to enhance it, that is how they were tweaked, and that's how these many vegetables were actually created. Frankly speaking, I didn't know that cabbage, from cabbage or cauliflower and the broccoli actually, and even the Brussels, they are all the varieties of cabbage. I didn't know about it. So that's very interesting, and it will be really interesting to find out how many such more wild vegetables are there, and what is the wild relative looks like, and what does actually the hybrid variety or the domesticated variety looks like. That's very interesting to know. So agriculture biodiversity is largely shaped, again I repeat, is by human interventions. It's through human interventions and practices only. This is where these variations have actually come in. So the traditional knowledge plays a very important role, and you will be also knowing that many of the plants, the ones which we use, are being used on various festivals also. Various festivals have like some food grain, some vegetable that has been only that signifies to for a particular festival. Like in South India, we have this the door, the garlands which are put along the door has the rice seeds. Rice seeds have been tied in that garland and put it. So that is some for the auspicious thing. So I believe there are such more practices in every religion which is connecting with our crops. Even documenting that kind of information will be very interesting. Like in Maharashtra alone, they say that nearly around 1600 species of flowering plants are used in traditional medicine, and many of which are threatened with extinction, and much of this diversity is preserved in sacred groves. So people who are outside Maharashtra, so there is this sacred groves concept very much known in Maharashtra, where a particular forest is protected under the name of a god, and that particular forest has a variety of or having species that could be endemic, that could be endangered, and that becomes like a gene pool of so many species. So there is this traditional medicinal plants are being grown in such sacred groves, and even in other places like Benin, where 245 species of traditional vegetables are used by communities all over the country as a source of food. So we have also, like, off lately you would have come across, at least in Maharashtra, this has been seen, the wild vegetables. Like here in Mumbai also, we get to see wild vegetables that come up during the monsoon time, only collected by the tribals from the forest and sold in the market. So there is a new trend of coming up the wild vegetables. The dilemma, of course, is there whether you should be consuming the wild vegetables or you should be not consuming wild vegetables. So before I was working on this presentation, I was of an opinion that we should be not eating these wild vegetables and we should only stick to what the domesticated varieties are there. But as I started actually doing more research on this, it seems that whatever species we are eating today are so limited, and these limited species are to keep them drought resistant or pest tolerant. You have to put so much of energy or so much of inputs are going just to get that good crop. So if you actually remove those efforts, then probably these crops will fail. So if we have actually more of a variety of wild vegetables, we have a mix of it, then probably this efforts will get it will be more sustainable. So it is debatable, of course. You can share your views, what you think, whether these vegetables are to be eaten or whether they should be not eaten. Okay. So I'll just give you a few examples. So I'll just go to this slide first. So now why, so we started with this concept of biodiversity. So why biodiversity? So biodiversity is as such means variety of life. So all the crops that we are, all the crops or the vegetables or whatever we are consuming today is actually has a gene pool in the forest. And forest is where this variety of life is existing. The biodiversity is existing right in our forest. So they are the origin. So they are the foundation of our agriculture. So we need to connect this part of biodiversity with our, with our food plate, our plate. How the forest is actually feeding our plates. So that connection is very. We need to be aware of it, so that that's when we actually make our agriculture more sustainable. So this is a foundation. The biodiversity is a foundation. Biodiversity is a part of the ecosystem services that has been extended to the agriculture sector. So it can't be never compromised. And without the ecosystem services extended by the biodiversity, our crops will be not, they will be not fail proof then. So that understanding is very much important. Like, as I mentioned, it's as the third sentence also says the same, that the today's crop and livestock biodiversity are the result of many thousand years of interventions from the wild species. So from the wild species, they actually came up with all these domesticated varieties. I'll share some examples about it, which you would be, most of you might be aware of it. So this is a red jungle fowl, which is a wild variety of a poultry, you can say, and that is I would say the father of the poultry industry. And this is the, the chicken, the poultry chicken over here. Then even the wild buffalo. This is a wild buffalo, which is still very much in our Indian forest is seen. And from this buffalo, so there are so many variety of buffaloes that have been actually domesticated variety or species have been actually brought in. So their gene pool was used to come up with all this, domesticated varieties which we are using today. Same applies to the vegetables, to our crops also. So this is a wild rice, and this is the rice which we are using. So all the wild relatives have been actually tailored or customized so that they become edible for us. This is a wild brinjal over here, and this is, you can see from this brinjal variety how brinjal species, how many varieties of brinjal were able to one can actually take out. So this is this diversity. This entire diversity of brinjals is coming because of this one species which is actually growing in a forest. So it's like, the hard disk is actually in the forest, and these are all the files which we are actually keeping in our drives, but our drive is susceptible for virus attack or anything can go wrong. If anything goes wrong with these files, you can always go to the drive, the main hard disk, and copy files. So if you remember that analogy, that we can't grow hard drives in our farms. We can only grow files, copied files in our farms. It's just like that, if you remember that. So that the hard drives, the gene pool of all wild species requires a forest ecosystem. So they are in the forest. So if we retain the forest, so our drive is safe and we can copy the files as and when required. So that's about the rice. Even though you can see this is wild grapes, and from the wild grapes you get so many varieties of grapes. This is a wild banana. If you open a wild banana, this is how the seeds look. And through genetic engineering, they would have reduced the seed size to a tiny speck now. So the banana now what we eat just has this black dots in it, that's it. And this is what the banana we are eating now. So this transformation of wild species to the edible varieties is a work of farmers and the genetic engineers who have actually tweaked this species to make it edible for it. So say the gene which was responsible for the big seed in the banana probably would have been replaced or removed with a smaller seed gene, and that's how the plant was propagation, and that's how it happens. So this is all the engineering that happens, technological work that happens in the agriculture sector as far as the research is concerned. Okay, so what's the problem? Now we got the understanding of the agrobiodiversity overall, just in general I would say, but what are the problems that, what is a problem with our agriculture biodiversity? Why are we even talking about it? So one of the two main challenges what the agriculture biodiversity is having is that, one, whatever the food we are growing, we can't stop growing our food. Yeah, but whatever agricultural land today is there, whether this land will be sufficient for the future generations, for the generations to come, can we continue to feed them with this place, with this land what we are having? Can our practices be sustainable, that we don't need more area and you grow more food with the given? So that is one of the, and also many of the agriculture practices are actually anti-environment, which means that more water is needed, the carbon footprint is very high, more land is taken away, so forests have been cleared, plus, so all this is actually having impact on environment, and that impact again affects the agriculture. So this is like a, like a benign circle for the agriculture sector. So how that could be actually addressed? So the solutions are like, so one of the solutions is that, let us look at that, what is needed, how much, like you would be knowing that the World Health Organization keeps coming up with the figures, like the future generation, we need so much of food needs to be produced, so many people need to be fed. So what kind of demography is there, how much food is needed, what kind of economy is there, like what kind of market is going to be there, what kind of government decisions are going to be there about, related to agriculture. So all these are like indirect things, but the most direct and the most impactful ones are, which actually affect our agriculture sector, are the direct drivers like climate change. So most of our crops are rain dependent, so anything happens with the rain, our crops fail. So how do we do climate resilient farming, how to have a climate resilient farming, and how to use the natural resources, especially water, in a very sustainable manner, so that we don't need more water to it, and how to not use or have very minimal uses of chemicals that are used in agriculture sector, or say completely no to it. That's not really possible, but still, like how we can actually reduce that. And it's a known fact that the damage to biodiversity has been largely because of the clearances. The amount of clearances that happens for acquiring new land, always, the new land. So that is one of the reasons, and it is expected to be the problem even till 2050. The loss of biodiversity will be accounted for agriculture sector. So our food is actually eating up our forest. So what we can do about it? So what are the repercussions of this, food production that we are having? So one is that we are using up the resources very fast, and so much so that we will run at a risk. We are already running at a risk that beyond the zone, so we are in a high risk zone in using up our ecosystem services which is there. So we are exceeding our requirements because there is more food production is happening. And in spite of having so much of food production, even in India being like saying that, okay, we are growing enough food for everyone, but yet the malnutrition rates are very high, which means that the food is there, but the nutrients are not really, right nutrients are not been given, like passed on. So obesity and malnutrition is a problem which still the world is facing. Everyone, all countries are facing, including India. And if here is an example showing that how much of food is been actually used, how much of crops we have been using. So the globally identified plant species are like 391,000, out of which some 5,538 are known to be edible plants, which in our entire history, human history, are being used. But currently, if you try to see, only top three crops are being used who are actually feeding 50% of population in the world, and 12 crops that together with 5 animal species provide 75% of world food today. So you can see the numbers that we have actually got down to only few crops and few species, that we have actually stopped relying on the other species, and that's that this imbalance is what is causing problems. And if you see the sustainable development goals, so all the sustainable development goals are these goals of the zero hunger, then the good health and well-being, then responsible consumption, then climate action, then life on land, is all connected with agriculture sector. So we can't really if some organization is working on hunger they can't really talk about only hunger because it is connected with the agriculture sector. A well-being of a community can't be just thought about in isolation because it is connected with agriculture. So the agriculture has this repercussion everywhere, so those connections need to be identified. So how to reduce this damage? So the sustainable farming or sustainable agriculture is again a concept which probably came up some 10 years back or maybe more than that, but after since 10 years, for last 10 years at least people have started talking about sustainable agriculture practices. Before people were not talking also, so now people have at least talking, because so how one can do it? So one can actually, the traditional knowledge is the key of both to sustain the biodiversity and to ensure global food security. Yeah, and the farmers are requested to both preserve the biodiversity and contribute to meet the nutritional need. So it's not that only think about the yields but not worry about the biodiversity. Now the practices that take care of the biodiversity also and take care of your yield also. So farms basically need to have the mixed planting or hedge plantation, having the boundaries, having a tree cover around the boundary, having mixed plantation, having some plant associates are also there. So you plant different crops together. So the one acts as a repellent for an insect. So the crop from that particular, like onions are growing. So onions and mints are grown. So onion will get protected with the mint. So such what is called companion plantation system is also there. Now to do all this is actually a tough job. If an acres and acres of rice has to be sown, it becomes very easy. But if somebody tells me that okay, this one line you only plant the rice, and other line you plant this other one, so that becomes actually too much of an effort, and that is maybe the one reason. But if it is a yield and one has to really think of having what is a rotational crop, then these practices have to be done. So, and I think government already there are subsidies available for the farmers who are experimenting, who are following the organic farming practices. But yes, still the takers it will take more time for people to really take up, like you have 100% organic farming in our country. So what are let us understand what are the linkages between producing the food and consuming agriculture biodiversity. So what are the linkages? So one is that if we keep doing the way we are doing right now, so same results will be there, it doesn't change anything. So what needs to change? One is that we have to diversify our food. If the food is diversified, automatically the farming diversity changes. And with the diversification in the food, there will be diversification in the nutrient content also. So nutrient content, like the same amount of food is eaten, but it will be more nutritive. So the malnutrition problem has been taken care of. So here this is just a calendar of crop calendar, that which crop can be grown in which month. Of course, this is going to change from country to country or area to area, but there is a season for every. So eating locally grown seasonal fruits and vegetables is a good way to go, rather than eating having same fruit throughout the year. Let us think of the producers that coming on a seasonal basis. So if farmers are very much aware of all this, but if there is a demand for it, then automatically the supply will also come in. So we as a consumer, we should be also, when we go to the market, we try to see that we don't end up buying foreign fruits just because they look flashy and they look very unique or whatever. Instead of that, let us buy what is grown locally and what is the season of the food, what is the seasonal fruit. Like right now, if you go to in this one of the wild vegetables I was talking about, there is one vegetable called kantoli. It is a Marathi name. It will be seen only at this time only, in the monsoon time only one will get to see. So we should eat that vegetable, because this is now it is grown and it will be not there in the market later on. So if we create a demand that way, so the more of kantolis will keep on coming to the market, every monsoon. So that these are the choices that we as a consumer can make, and we can actually make this agrobiodiversity work in the farms, provided we have this. So this cycle of year-long cycle of growing mixed vegetables and crops and fruits will actually help to retain the agrobiodiversity. So in old model, it was always the quantity of the seed it was all yield related, that how many acres will yield me how many quintals of rice or wheat or something. That approach has to be changed now. That approach has to be changed, and the new approach has to come of not about how many quintals. Now this will take really a longer time to change the mindset, but how much nutrition value is there, and whether the farmers are using diversified seeds, not only same kind of seed, diversified, and the productive, the inputs into the farming practices is less, and the farms are resilient, they can survive a drought, they can survive a flood, whether we can have the resilient landscapes which can actually take care so that the farmer is not burdened by it, and conservation of the agrobiodiversity for future options. So like biodiversity, bringing the biodiversity to the farms. And I'll show you some examples, some very interesting examples from some countries, of course, and some are from our country also. I'll just show you. So the nutrition value, agrobiodiversity has an impact on our health because it is directly connected with the nutrition. So here is one example which has been mentioned over here, that there are this minor millets have protein levels close to the wheat and are rich in vitamin B, calcium, iron, potassium, and so on. Yet they account for less than 1% of food grains produced, because they are like the wheat is taking the wheat is a showstopper. So the millet is not given chance at all. But the millets are easier to grow because they are resilient plants. They require less water, and they are mostly grown in marginal areas where major cereals actually fail. So based on the location, based on the site, the crop should be selected rather than by the value of the yield. How much of cash crops will get me money? I'm trying to grow and taking loan and failing to. So that is like a benign circle. So that will only stop if the local biodiversity is tapped into it and the agrobiodiversity is looked into it. And I think I'm assuming that all the state agriculture department, the agriculture colleges and the universities are probably doing already all this. As I said, that this is not my field, and so I'm not really touched with this kind of research, but I'm sure this is all happening over there, but it needs to happen at a very larger scale, where it should be like, we as a consumer, we should be able to see such kind of produces coming to the, market. In India, if you actually Google up, there are many seed banks where the farmers can actually store their seeds from every harvest in this bank, and they can actually, there is an exchange of seeds also that happens. So I collected some, say I'm a farmer who is growing wheat or maybe some cucumbers or maybe some beans or whatever, and then whatever did well from that year's crop, I collect the seeds and I go and deposit in this bank. So same as my neighbor is also doing the same thing, but my neighbor is growing some different crops. So I can, as a bank, the way you can actually withdraw money, so against your seeds you can withdraw other seeds also. So that's how these seed banks are operating. But again, as I said, I don't have really the know-how of how all this is happening, but what happens is that there is a seed conservation system in place, and this is a government driven place. And you will also know about Vandana Shiva, who actually brought out this revolution, seed revolution. Her organization called Navdhanya, her organization did this entire propaganda against multi-billionaire companies who were actually selling the seeds to the farmers, and the farmers were dependent on the company to buy the seeds, and the seeds were in one-time use kind of seeds. Once they are planted, you can't get the second yield again. For the second time you have to go there. That is what was causing the problem. That is what was causing the problem for the the farmers, and that's when the Vandana Shiva, actually you should go. You might be knowing about her, surely. If not, please Google her. She's an amazing, she's called as a green revolution scientist. So you should really read up about her and the kind of revolution she brought. And the seed banks is one of her interventions that she had started. And yes, I had a fortune to meet her, and I was really mesmerized by her talks and her entire personality. So yes, such kind of revolutions have happened, and therefore today the seeds which are actually the local farmers are actually growing, they are protected by government, and one can go and use seeds and benefit from each other's experience. This is a traditional knowledge. This is where the traditional knowledge is getting used by the locals itself, and they are the beneficiaries. And also this one movement was also which happened again in central and in South India. This has happened where the local groups actually made that the millets should be added to the public distribution system. Like it's not in the, because they are more drought resistant and they are the traditional diets. So the government actually brought in the millets into the public distribution system. The millets were made, the food recipes were available in the dishes were available in the restaurant, and even the midday meals were having. So like popularizing a seed, I think government can really do a fantastic job in terms of popularizing the unknown crops, unknown crops and unknown food items. So that is where we will be also, educated about it. This is, I read about it and I was so fascinated, this is an example from US. Like as I told that I was like, I didn't tell you people, sorry. I was in US for almost a year. I was on a fellowship, and that's the time I was actually exploring all the environmental organizations in United States, and I came across this concept of birds and beans. So this is a special coffee which is grown from the coffee plantation, which is bird friendly. So this coffee plantation has a hedge plantation or mixed plantation which actually helps birds. So birds are actually part of that coffee plantation, and it supports their biodiversity, and therefore this seeds are like bird friendly seeds, they say, and therefore this coffee obviously might be expensive than the normal coffee, but this is what the way of telling that this food is biodiversity friendly food. I don't think so we have such brand in India yet, but I think our Indian companies should also think about this, making the coffee plantation, making more it biodiversity friendly, bird friendly, so that our the food what we generate should be not really taxing the biodiversity. We should include them in it and still have. This is one of the example of sustainable agriculture practices. I have an example to show you that how a poultry, this is a poultry model of a sustainable, how a poultry model which is normally the practice, and how it can be changed into, if it is been operated in an agriculture, sustainable agriculture model, how it will look like. So this is a usual model where every supply is coming from outside. There is a fertilizer, the manure for the plants, everything, is coming from outside, and even the nutrient vitamins for the cattle, everything is coming from outside. And then and also, like, so it is too much of like inputs, it is more too much of inputs are getting into this from external inputs, what is called as. But if you have to so this is called a control model. And in resilience model, what happens is that there is the area, the pastures where the cattle is feeding is having more of a biodiversity. The plants are allowed to grow wild. Some wild plants are growing. There are wildflowers. There are pollinators. All small ecosystem is established. It is not like a lawn kind of thing only meant for the grazing purpose, but it is like a habitat by itself. And that habitat, in a healthy habitat, the cattle are actually feeding on it. So that is a resilience model. So what all changes in this model? So there are 4 pillars of biodiversity which is working over here. So one is the species biodiversity, that what kind of animals are seen on the farm. Then what kind of corridors and source areas are there. So corridors are something like, the hedges. What hedges are there? What are the area around the farm looking like? Are there enough pathways or underways for the wildlife to move? Is there a wildlife movement? Is it wildlife movement friendly or not? So that whether those corridors have been created, plus whether the landscape diversity, it is not like a plain line, it is a plain whether it is just a plain like a grassy land, or it is having a diverse habitat within it. So what kind of diversity is there, and then how good the soil is, how fertile it is, how is the soil quality, whether there are earthworms seen, there is a good mulch in it, all that matters. Whether the decomposition, is the natural mulch is there. So all these aspects matter in the farm. And then what is the input and what is the output, whether the external output which is there, whether that could be reduced. So in a control model where the manure was to be imported, even the plants seeds were also imported, but in this in the resilience model, the manure could be used like within, if the recycling is happening within the habitat, so the same manure could be used, or compost could be made. So having a more sustainable way of managing a site rather than pumping more chemicals and getting more outside. So here you can see the example, there are more animals and less of the space is there, and here the animals is less and more of land is there, but the benefit is that there is more diversity, more plants available for the biodiversity. Of course, from a farmer's perspective, one will say that I need to have the maximum yield with limited resource. Remember that I gave you that model. But that is what has to be changed. So if you want to have resilience in a farm, this per yield mindset has to be changed. And then not only one variety of cattle, the different variety of cattle are growing, So having different variety, which means that they have different resilience power, they have different disease tolerance power. So it is not like a disease which is passed on from one to another, but one is resilient, one is not resilient. So having a mix will happen. Not only mix in the cattle, but also mix in the grazing area. What kind of food that they are grazing on? Even if there is a mix of it, there is a better nutrient value, so you don't have to use any antibiotics, vitamin boosters for the animals to grow healthy and all that. It happens in a very natural manner, and plus you support the local biodiversity. So this is how usually the a pasture land should look like. A variety of habitat. There is a waterways, there is a grassland, there is a herbland, a flowering patch, hedges are there, all this. And this is like the free, what in US they actually sell all items based on this free range. Free range means the animals have been not kept in captivity, they have been open, they have been healthy, So this is one of the examples of how sustainable agriculture can actually bring in that will support biodiversity. So what's really happening nowadays in terms of protecting agrobiodiversity? So there is all this in situ conservation projects are happening where people are actually studying the wild relatives, who are the wild crops. Here you can see one team of Biodiversity International. They are trying to study the wild mangoes, the variety of wild mangoes found in Indonesia. Then here the coconut field bank is there, the banana seedlings are also, so they are actually in ex situ means like they are done in the labs. So lab studies are done, and this lady has collected different kinds of gourd seeds that she has collected, and these could be tested in the lab to see the yield of it, that how much of, what is the fruit size, how big it grows, what is the how much yield one can get. So those kind of experiments is also happening. And then the link of this if this is a farmland, so this is how the ecosystem will work. So one is that having the plants in the margin provision, there is a nutrient cycling happening in the ground, the rice production is happening here, pest predation, so that the trees are there, the birds are there, so birds will come and take care of the insects. There is a water ecosystem that is easily maintained, so the water table is healthy. There is a fish habitat, so if the fish is there, more birds will be coming. So when birds start, you attract birds. So of course many will say, okay, birds will eat away the seeds, but that's what that if you have an ecosystem, then everything is actually taken care by automatically. But if you have just one system, then obviously the birds will just come and eat away the seeds and gone, the fruit eating ones. So maybe by creating the right habitat, the right birds will actually come. So having the soil erosion has been taken care, the corridors have been taken care, and everything. So this is like a perfect site, yeah. But to reach over here, it is too much of effort and too much of work is needed in this sector, and I'm sure the organizations which are working in this field probably might be having really tough time to really communicate this to even to farmers. Because I remember I had done a small work in Gujarat. In Gujarat, I was on a short, on a 1 month, I was assisting some UK scientists who were actually trying to assess the biodiversity between the organic cotton farms and BT cotton farms. So we were doing this sampling of invertebrates, that which farms were having better invertebrates, and obviously we found that the insect life in organic farm was much better than the BT cotton. But when I was interacting with the BT cotton farmers and the organic farmers, so there was so much a difference in the thought process itself. So the BT cotton farmer is more in the yield, like every year I should get so much quintal of cotton, and that's it. He's not worried about the next year after it, right? Whereas the organic farmer he's okay that he's because he will not use any chemicals. So obviously if there is some insect attack or something, he will probably allow the crop to be resilient to deal with it with whatever ecosystem services are available. So obviously his yield in the first year is lower. His yield actually increases year by year, whereas the one who is growing the BT cotton, his yield will remain same because he has to keep on buying the seeds from the company. His seeds are like the BT cotton seeds are not like we can grow it for the next year again, but the organic cotton farmers, they can use their own seeds to grow the next. So you know there are this plus and minuses are there, but how you look at it. And then the organic cotton farmers will start getting their yield from the year 3 or 4, they start getting the produce, and this BT cotton farmers, their yield starts dropping down because the soil fertility goes down. So they have to work like, so rather you get an ecosystem established and let the ecosystem do the job, like you know, it's like outsourcing an ecosystem to do the job of maintaining your farmland, or you yourself take on that responsibility of maintaining your farmland, then you work on the soil, you work on the plants. So it's too much of work, you know. So it is like a short term and long term. So it's all about mindset actually. This is what I experienced at that point of time. So what actually agrobiodiversity, what does agrobiodiversity does? So agrobiodiversity gives chance to deal with problems. You know, like you know, this in Ghana, the farmers are planting crops that mature faster to deal with climate change or you know climatic any rainfall issue. So they are changing the cropping pattern so that if if there are any weather repercussions happening, so it will not affect their crops. So they are changing that. Like also in Ethiopia, farmers are facing high rainfall variability. So what? So they are growing that rather than you know more of pea plants, more of beans rather than wheat and lentils. So just to respond to the high rainfall variability. So their people, farmers are changing the cropping pattern. That is also is very much needed, and that is where the biodiversity comes into play. So if the farmers are aware of the that this kind of biodiversity is available, I can replace a crop with this one, and I'm sure this all training agriculture training institutes which are there, which are for farmers, they might be training the farmers about this. So farmers can actually always have way, but it is always again, you know, a direct gain is always more lucrative than an indirect gain. So when we talk about agrobiodiversity, it's about indirect gain at a first, but later on you start, you know, they start seeing the results. So finally, so this is what the entire overview is there. But as I said, that this agrobiodiversity as a subject itself is a very I don't know how many of you actually have heard about this, people talking about it or what. I at least have not heard about it. I was at this COP10. COP10 is like Conference of Parties, which is like is a global congregation of all government officials from different countries. They come together during the Conference of Parties. It happens every once in 2 years. So it had happened in 2011 or 12 in India, in Hyderabad. That time I had attended that Conference of Parties. And that's where first time I heard this agriculture biodiversity, and I was really fascinated at that point of time. I said biodiversity from the agriculture perspective is so different concept altogether. So it was there with me for a very long time, and then therefore I thought that let me talk about it. It's a very difficult subject. I had a tough time talking about it also. I don't know how much of it it helps you, but as I said, this is just a starting. You can actually go and find out more information on your own. So what is really needed today for agrobiodiversity, if you want to really protect this, is that, so one is that the nutrition and diverse diets is something we have to start promoting. We have to start practicing also. Like within our own families, can we diversify what we are eating? Can we diversify? Can we try out with different grains? You know, so that is one. Then having the productive and resilient farms, so farms and landscapes which are resilient. And I think here there is a scope for corporates to play a role, because I know many corporates who work with farmers, but I have seen that the role of working with farmers is more of working with the crops. It's all about crops. How much yield you can get, how much money you can make, because they want to bring them out of the poverty line, which is good, But now there's a second line of work which is needed, talking about the biodiversity in the farms. How to bring biodiversity into your farm so that your farm becomes resilient. Yeah, so this is where, because corporates do extensive plantation programs. I think they should also look into the plantation programs along the farms. This is another area where biodiversity plantation could be done, where the bee flowers, bird attracting trees, they could be planted along the farm hedges. Because for a farmer, actually the challenge is that he or she doesn't want to lose that land for something else which is not going to give any crop to him. That's a mindset. So if either government comes up with subsidies, there is no subsidy for this, I think so, I don't know. If somebody knows, please let me know. At least there is no subsidy for that. If you grow a biodiversity plantation on your farm, you get so much of subsidy. Actually, if government gives that, I think there will be more incentive for farmers to do biodiversity plantation around their farms. So that is one area where we can actually work. Then farmers having access to quality and diverse seed, and the seed banks are playing a fantastic role in doing that. So having more seed banks is really will be helpful for the farmers, because then they are not dependent on companies who are selling the seeds, all the genetic GM crop seeds, or seeds at one time use seeds, only one time crop you'll get. And the conservation of the agrobiodiversity, the gene pool has to be retained, the germ plasm has to be stored and protected. I think so. With that, I have come to an end of my presentation. So this is, as I said, that this webinar we have been doing for our course, which is called online course on kitchen gardening. So kitchen gardening is more of growing food for ourselves, but having this knowledge of how the food is connecting with biodiversity is what we want to bring in. So therefore we included this, and if anybody is interested in taking up this 6-week long course, they can actually sign up. We have a next batch starting on 15th September. So through this course we help people set up their own kitchen gardens. We do this weekly consultation with them, and they get all information from us, and they set up the garden. And having a pollinator plantation or having a bee home is also part of the assignments, because we bring in biodiversity everywhere we talk about, because we are biodiversity specialists. So we want to incorporate biodiversity in every field of our work. So thank you very much, friends, and if you have any questions, I will request you to write down your questions in the comment box. So far nobody has asked me any questions, so I think there's nothing for me to answer over here. But you can, if you are interested in having this presentation from us, so you can actually write to us. We will send a copy, and then and we are now actually planning to start a new course. It is still in a progress, is biodiversity for beginners. So that is this theme will very well fit into that agrobiodiversity. So thank you very much. So Sharda is asking me, farmers are encouraged to buy seeds every year rather than save seeds. I don't. So because so Sharda, this is what I'm saying, that the farmers who are actually storing the seeds, who are growing the seeds, so the seeds which have been purchased, their viability goes away with one season, with one crop on itself. That's how they've been, it's like I would say that's how they've been engineered. So growing more on an organic way of growing plants, if one goes by the organic way, then they can harvest their own seeds and their viability remains. So this is what the seed bank is actually doing, and therefore the farmers should be more and more aware of it. So there is a good amount of awareness needed among the farmers, or in the farming sector, or people who are working with farmers should actually bring. Probably they would be doing, I don't know, but yes, this is the main reason. The seeds are like one time use, therefore they have to go and buy it again. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Sharda. And so any more questions are there, so please you can drop in. Otherwise, thank you so much for being with me on this webinar. If you have any questions, you can type it here, and we will try to answer later on whenever it comes. So thank you so much, and good night, please.